Oh, there you go. Oh my gosh. I think about it, I dream about him, and he shows up.
Hey.
Oh, he's one of the best buddies. Thank
Thanks
you
for
very
saying
much,
that.
Shady. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's but on the side of the story, I have a great story tonight. If you want to really go and listen to the best story, you have to catch the bus at 7 o'clock. You know where that is? Right at the Manjoni metro station right there. So near the Manjoni metro station at the corner of Manjoni and Filibereto Street. And there will be several buses. Please show up there at 7 o'clock. Otherwise, there is no way you will be able to find this secret place where we are going to eat tonight. So we will see you there. Now, it's my great privilege to introduce our featured speaker for this evening, CD Glin. CD, as we call him dearly, is Associate Director of the Rockefeller Foundation for Africa region. He is based in Nairobi, Kenya. He supports and leads the strategy development and execution of several initiatives to contribute to the Foundation's dual goal to advance inclusive economies and build resilience. His grant-making and investment portfolio primarily focuses on agricultural and rural development and includes the Foundation's emerging initiative to increase economic opportunity, enhance food security, and contribute to environmental sustainability by reducing waste and loss without agricultural supply chains. Prior to joining the Rockefeller Foundation, Mr. Glin was a White House appointee in the Obama administration, where he served as the first Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and Global Partnership for Peace Corps. In that capacity, he established the office and led interagency collaboration and public-private partnership efforts on 3 key U.S. governmental initiatives: the Global Health Initiative, Feed the Future, the Global Hunger and Food Security Initiative, and Global Climate Change Initiative, to enhance and align the developmental impact of approximately 9,000 grassroots volunteers serving worldwide. It is our privilege to have CD here. He's a great friend, a wonderful friend of our institute, and he is the one who supported us generously, as you can see, to make this Congress happen. With that, I turn this podium to you, CD.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. When Prasanta said I'm a great friend, I'm not sure if I really believe him, because you don't put anyone in a 5 p.m. day-long session and call them a friend. But, I take when Prasanta says show up, I just say what time. I was a little late, but I'm here. It's really, really a pleasure to be here with all of you, a lot of great friends, a lot of great partners of the foundation here in Rome. This was a vision that had been laid out more than a year ago, and I have to say that it's not only the Rockefeller Foundation or ADM, but one of my signature partners in crime on anything that the foundation has done over the past some odd 2 years on waste and spoilage, food loss. I wanted to give a personal shout out to my friend and sister Charlene McCoyne of the Gates Foundation. Rockefeller and Gates are joined at the hip in Agra and some other initiatives, but when we looked at this issue, we know we can't do it alone regardless, but we also know that there are a number of partners who may be able to augment some of the work that we may do, and we may be able to augment some of the work that they do. And Gates has definitely been a partner, as we've learned along the way over the past 2 years. When you work for, and a lot of you know because you have worked for foundations or bilateral, multilateral entities, if you're in a bilateral or multilateral entity, you're thinking about your member states, you're thinking about your from the American people, your national citizens. When you're at a foundation, sometimes the challenge is sort of what not to do. When everything's a great idea, I meet people every day, and there's a lot of great things that we need to work on to make the world a better place. And the Rockefeller Foundation has been doing that for 102 years. So when you can do anything, what's the parameters by which you try to know what to do? And that's the challenge and the struggle that we have. But there are a number of complex issues that are dominating society today And when we looked at the advent of climate change, when we look at rising urbanization that's changing food patterns, when we look at the issue of a growing population, it's been said over and over and over again today on how to feed 9 billion, we actually look at those issues and say, okay, where do we as the Rockefeller Foundation fit? And what should we do about that issue? And the complexity of the issue really says that we need to bring about a systems approach. And so the foundation came to the issue of food waste and spoilage by asking ourselves, what does the world need right now? Where is there a pressing problem that there's dynamism around it, but it just needs a kickstart? People have been talking about it for a while, but where's the action behind it? And that's what led us to this issue of food waste and spoilage. And food loss or food waste and post-harvest loss, some of the nomenclature, we tried not to get caught up in it. It's very important. A lot of you spend a lot of your careers on the differentiation, but we sort of looked at the issue holistically. So, I don't want to harp on this slide because it's been talked about all day. But it's just really important to realize that it is a global problem. It really is hitting on incomes, it's hitting on food security, and it's also hitting on environmental security. And so we looked at this issue and said, there's something here that if we tackle food loss, this might be the pathway to greater impact. If we optimize value chains to reduce post-harvest loss, we might be able to get a triple bottom line win in incomes and in social and nutritional issues, as well as environmental security. And we sort of said it's particularly acute in Africa for a number of reasons. And the last bottom on the opportunity. Right now, as I said, Africa is sort of at the epicenter of market dynamism because of the availability of arable land, because of rising populations, because of, to be honest, cost-effective labor, and then the realities around urbanization. So there's a lot of things happening in Africa right now, but these food crop loss is exacerbated because of a lot of the market inefficiencies. And we also were very, very clear in scoping out where did we want to play. In terms of if we can't do everything, how do we know, again, what not to do or where do we want to scope our issue? So we sort of said we want to be in food crops. So we decided not to go into loss reduction in dairy, and we decided not to look at aquaculture, not because we don't think it's important, but because we have other initiatives and other partners and other entities, whether they be multilaterals or bilaterals or donor organizations or foundations working on some of these issues. So we decided let's scope this around food crops. And then we said, which food crops? So we said cereals and grains, because you're looking at, again, I don't want to do the job that all of you on a daily basis and really talk about the loss measurement, but in the realm of 20%. Roots and tubers, cassava is at the epicenter of that, obviously at 40%. And then the white space, to be honest. And I'll take, comments on whether or not it's viable or not or what have you, but this is the white space of fruits and vegetables, because they're called perishables for a reason. They perish. And so why is it that it's 2015 and we're still struggling with this issue around a real concerted effort around perishables? And there are a lot of reasons why, but we said we can't ignore that. If we're going to get into this space, if it's going to be as Phil Villers would say, the second green revolution or the unfinished business of the green revolution, then we said, let's make sure we look at the issue holistically. And so I had a lot of tough conversations with my leadership. You all met Dr. Roden this morning. She's a brilliant mind, but also will question any and everything you say with some real academic and intellectual rigor. But I said we need to look at this issue across multiple food crops, and that's how we got there. And then we really said there also is something to be said about the solution to, or a solution to food loss that really is based upon sort of the market. Because we have a lot of research around the issue, and we have a lot of research around some of the components that needed to be done to reduce loss. We said, let's really look at this. If all of these major food companies, and there's such a demand for food, and there's such a demand and efficiency around nutrition, there's something to be said about the market dynamics, that in this era, in this day and age, in 2015 and beyond, that we could probably look at this a little bit different, and we're looking at sort of a market-based approach to this, so that it can give the incentive for smallholders to change some of their practices that would reduce food loss. So we undertook a study, and I'm going to go a little bit fast because I definitely don't want to keep you here all night. And then I've been working on this for about 2 years, so I could literally be here all night. But we said, let's have a case study in the mango value chain and really see what happens in the mango value chain in Kenya. And so we work with some consulting. We work with a great NGO called TechnoServe that had a lot of experience in the space. And you look at the value chain of farmers groups, and then traders, somewhat consolidators, processors, wholesalers. So where does loss occur? A lot of empirical data around 45% in the Kenyan mango value chain, 45% sort of on-farm, near-farm. Then in distribution and transportation was another 5%. Then we sort of said at the local market. If it doesn't hit the processor, then obviously for the fresh market, there's a lot of things related to the shelf life. So we're sort of looking at a 60% loss in that value chain without any intervention, without any sort of strong intervention. There have been some interventions in the mango value chain, and TechnoServe and entities such as Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation did some great work on Project Nurture, which a lot of you may know about because it was a great Harvard business case study around reducing this value chain that was about 60% loss down to about 30, so cutting about 50% in by just linking up smallholder-driven supply and market demand of a major buyer of mango puree, Coca-Cola for the juice market. So we know that there are things that could exist. The one thing I want to say about this, and when I unpacked the Project Nurture value chain project, it was fantastic. 55,000. Well, the metric was really about incomes. How do we raise smallholder incomes? And you saw in my opening slide, we're looking at this as a triple bottom line. So when you focus on incomes, and you're at the farmer groups, and you're at 45%, and you link them with a market demand at a processor who may be selling to a large buyer, we saw those losses go really down. Well, we saw the incomes go up of the smallholders. But because there was a market demand for mangoes, everyone in Kenya all of a sudden said, there's money in mangoes. So the production levels shot through the roof. They shot through the roof. It's already a glut type of product because of the cyclical cycle of harvest, but there was money in mangoes. And so whether you had the proper tree that was going to turn into juice or not, you were growing and taking care of your mangoes. So while incomes doubled, it's a fantastic project. Incomes doubled for 55,000 smallholders in Kenya. Loss levels in this value chain that were average around 50 to 60 went to like 60 to 80 because all you did was increase production, have a secure demand for some smallholders, but there were no other off-takers. It was really about mangoes for puree, and so what about the fresh market? What about the dried market? What about the other market dynamics? So when I looked at it, I said, this is a really successful project for supply chain intervention, but it's not reducing post-harvest loss. So this is, quote unquote, an opportunity to build on some positive momentum that's happening with sourcing from smallholders, but really to optimize these value chains with a loss reduction mentality. So Sela is a farmer in northern Kenya, and she is emblematic of the real situation of what smallholders, and you guys know this better than I do, what they really face in Africa. I used to have a boss that sort of I would say, well, I hope this works out, and I hope that this is going to be a good day, or I hope that this presentation goes well, and she would say, hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. But for Sela, who lives in Kenya, who grows potatoes with no knowledge of if it's going to rain, with no knowledge of if she's going to, what her yield will be, with no knowledge of where she's going to sell to, and no knowledge of storage technology that can help preserve, hope is her only strategy. She's hoping that it rains. She's hoping that there's a buyer. She's hoping that that buyer gives her a fair price. And she's thinking that there has to be a better way than to let my potatoes rot. So this is emblematic of the real situation, not only in Africa, but of 500 million smallholder farmers who really, because of information asymmetry, but also the fragmentation in the system, hope is their strategy. If it's rain-fed agriculture, if it's agriculture that's dependent upon off-takers and they come and take what they need and leave the rest, then you're just hoping you get a good deal. And in this instance, she refused, because at some point you say no. At some point I know I'm getting ripped off, and you know what? I'll let it waste before I let you rip me off. Maybe not a positive thing to do from a market perspective, but from a self-pride perspective, I'm not going to allow it. And that's her reality. And so we should all think about this from the standpoint that hope isn't a strategy, and there are systemic solutions that we can bring to bear on our situation. It says that she said that she didn't get a buyer and her potatoes were wasted. Because again, a lot of you who work in technology, and I want to unpack, and we talked about a lot today, technological solutions, why not some level of storage? And so thinking about Sella, and thinking about what we as the Rockefeller Foundation could do, we do what most people do when they think that, there's a problem, there's probably a technological solution to that. There's an app for that. There has to be an app for post-harvest loss. So we go straight into the technology. And we sort of said, let's do an ROI analysis on all the post-harvest technologies out there. And the one thing that we were smart enough, even though we were thinking technology first and foremost, we were smart enough to know that this wasn't going to be the type of research and learning initiative where we were going to have a call for proposals or a challenge fund to invent 200 new technologies that would reduce post-harvest loss. We really said our ongoing and initial hypothesis was that there are things that are out there that are reaching 500,000, 10,000, 1 million, 20,000. They're just not getting to scale. There are distribution challenges. There's all these things. So we said we don't want to be, as a primary component of what we do, in the invention game. We didn't want to focus on the invention. So we looked out there, 200 plus post-harvest technology, some process innovations, some product innovations. We went through a filtering process with a consulting firm, Monitor Deloitte, got it down to sort of 60, looking at the ROI, and then sort of really honing in on what is really viable in the value chains that we're looking at in the different markets. And then we landed and sort of said, there are probably about 12 that we can look at that could be cost-effective, that could be potentially game-changing, and let's sort of see, because we do think technology is part of the answer. The problem is a lot of people in our space think technology is the answer. There is no app for this. An app can help, but there's no app for optimizing a value chain for loss or reducing loss. So we said we don't want to discount technology. We don't want to work in the invention game because we would get a lot of proposals for a lot of shiny new things, and they would sit on shelves and they would sit in laboratories, or they'd work in one village somewhere, and people would say, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and it reached 10 people. So we sort of said there's things out there that are really innovative, but also don't have the level of support to really distribute them until we got down to 12. And these are things that you all know about, which is a good thing, because you know about them. That means we know they exist. We know that they work. So hermetic storage, whether you're talking about super grain with grain pour, whether you're talking about picks, metal silos, whether you're talking about 200 kg metal silos or something, the big silos that you get from an AGCO, Grain Storage International, GSI. Metal crates. I live in Kenya now. I lived in northern Nigeria for a number of years, and just the tomato value chain and these beautiful raffia baskets that my wife uses for trash cans that people use to transport tons and tons of tomatoes because they stack them on top of each other and then ride for 200 kilometers. And guess what? The ones that are at the bottom, there's no more tomato there. It's tomato juice, tomato paste, tomato seeds, but there's no more tomato. But the baskets are so cute. My wife loves them, but she doesn't use them to carry tomatoes. So plastic crates. And then we talked a lot about this around technology, but mobile processing. How do we take the factory and the processing closer to the farm? So again, we didn't get into this space and say, what's not happening? We want to be special. We want to come up with something new. What is out there that's working that we can help scale, that we can integrate in a systemic approach to bring about change and transformation? So technology is part of the puzzle, but we really unpacked, and we're not going to go through all this reading. This will be made available to you, this deck. But technologies are part of it, but also the market demand linkages that we talked about in the great mango, the market pull aspect. In the mango story. Smallholder farmer aggregation and training. We feel like it's critical and a key component. And then financing. So the way that we talk about this internally at the foundation is we've talked about these are the 4 critical components to optimizing a value chain for scale. Every one of you can tell me a successful intervention in the post-harvest loss space in one of these domains. All of you can tell me about a great financing opportunity that reduced loss, a great market linkage program that really was really successful, a technological solution, PICS bags or Grain Pro cocoons, fantastic. Can we integrate them? Can we bring the training linked to the market, and the smallholder farmer training linked to on-farm, near-farm, and even village-level storage? Can we bring in financing and really get on the ground and see what happens when we do this in a systematic way? Our space hasn't done that. We're all working in different areas, having these isolated solutions, and so we feel like the real innovation is a process innovation, a recombinant innovation. Let's recombine some of these things and bring them together and then demonstrate a model on a value chain and see if we can drop down loss levels. A lot more to unpack on this, but I think you get the general overarching picture. This is one of the most complicated, I can talk to an audience usually and say, this is the most complicated slide that I know you've seen, but this esteemed audience is like, oh, this is child's play. You know, we have slides that don't even have words, they just have lines and zigzags, and so we look at this as complex because the value chain is complex. So what you see in the dark blue is the existing value chain, the existing actors. What you see in the green are what we said we need to bring into that supply chain. So you have farmer groups, so we're talking about aggregating and organizing farmer groups. And then we're saying, how do we consolidate traders and brokers into sort of collection centers? And then processors are really key, very specific to certain crop categories. And then the market pull. The market pull. When somebody was, when mango juice became the #1 seller for the Minute Maid brand, there was money in mangoes. There's money in mangoes for people who have the right variety, but the other people didn't know where their market was. And so it's not only about the large buyers. We want to leverage their market pool, but then you see below them, the green box below them is about alternative markets. The dynamism we see in Africa with retail, with hospitality, with tourism and the like, all this is driving a lot of, and urbanization in general, are driving food patterns, are driving opportunities for fresh local vegetables, the great work of GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, a marketplace for nutritious foods. So there is an opportunity in the local market as well as in the multinational large-scale buyers, and we need to link to both to de-risk some of the market pull of the large buyer. But guess what? Those farmers want other options. I have 200 mango trees. Maybe 30 of them are for the proper variety in Gowe that goes into juice. But I also have some that could be for the fresh market. I have some that could be for the fresh local market, the fresh export market. Hey, we all know, if you don't, you should get to know her, Sophie Walker and ACD Ivoca and drying. The dried market, not only for cereals, the dried market for fruits and vegetables, it's coming. This is what we want when we're sitting in traffic in Nairobi for 4 hours and we can eat something healthy and eat some dried fruit, because you will sit in traffic for 4 hours in Nairobi if you don't know. There are alternative markets for fruits and vegetables, and we know that there are real opportunities for smallholders to have different markets for their production. We're going to we think about linking to the large and the local market. We want to work with international NGOs to consolidate some of the value chain. These are the traders and the brokers, and looking at aggregating them in sort of aggregation centers where we're bringing their product to central points. And more importantly, the far right side is critical because it goes to this technology question. So if there are great things out there, how do they get distributed? So agro dealers, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, and many other organizations, but definitely their great work on agro dealers, agro vets, agro dealers. Really, these are the last reliable source of information for smallholders, and they are the domain of input suppliers. The Syngentas, the Bayers, the Seedcos, these entities, the DuPont pioneers, they need their seeds and their inputs out to market. And who do they use? Local SMEs, guys and women with a 4x4 kiosk, and they're the last reliable source of information for smallholders. Where do they buy their seeds? Oh, I should use a little bit of fertilizer with that. These guys distribute technology. It's input technology, and we said, why can't we use them? Why can't we use these agro dealers to also distribute PICS bags, to also have next to them metal storage, silo, fabrication pieces? So we sort of said they're really critical, these agro dealers, because they distribute the technology. And we also are very clear that the role that the foundation can play, as Dr. Roden said, for those of you who were in the opening, is really a systems integrator and a broker. So the banks might want to lend or might not want to lend to smallholders. They might want to lend or might not want to lend to the agro-dealers and the technology providers. But when a market actor comes in and says, I got a bet on this entity, I'm giving them my seeds on a basis by which we're training them and we have a trust relationship, the bank starts looking up and saying, okay, maybe there's something there. And then if a foundation comes and says, oh, you know what we'll do? We want to unlock lending to smallholders. So we'll put down a credit guarantee. We're looking at leasing facilities. We'll do something to de-risk your lending to smallholders. But if we do it for 3 years, we do it for 5 years, we're going to get out the way, and we want the market to really work. So the financial institutions and the access to finance for technology acquisition is really critical. But again, one component alone does not make an optimized value chain. So we really look at ourselves as bringing all of these pieces together. Those of you who really focus on, I don't know how visible this is at all, but when I talked about the model, so you have market demand, you have smallholder aggregation, you have technology, you have finance. What's really interesting, and you know this better than I do, is that it really depends. The kind of technologies you need and the incentives for the buyers are really specific to certain crop categories. So we have sort of unpacked some of the specificity and the content specific knowledge for certain value chains. When we're talking about fruits and vegetables and cassava, you're really talking about a quality play. There's a lot to deal with quality and variety. And that specificity is driven by the market maker. And so the point of emphasis in a value chain where we're talking about something like cassava or fruits and vegetables, we really feel like is on this market demand. If we link to strong market demand and make sure there's multiple options, that's a critical piece to tilt a fruit and vegetable or a roots and tubers supply chain towards optimization, because you have an off-taker who can say, I can get the right variety in the right quantity the way I want it and how I need it. And that's sort of the incentive and the point of emphasis for them. Most people in our space have always sort of been on the cereals and grain side, and that's really about quantity. It's quality as well, and so don't throw eggs at me or tomatoes or what have you. Don't waste food throwing it at me. But I understand. I'm just sort of using generalities here. That really is, let's get a large volume of maize that's clean, that's dried, that's milled in a location, because I don't want to go to 50 farms or 500 farms. If we have central aggregation points, this is critical, and these one-stop shops where multiple buyers can source, whether it's WFP or a local miller or a Cargill, creating the environment for smallholders to store for their own subsistence in the household with hermetic storage bags, and to be able to distribute to a central location that can really be an off-taker location that really allows market actors and other people to source from there. So we look at it pivoting. We look at our model pivoting on market demand for fruits and vegetables and for cereals and grains, really on this aggregation component. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel. We don't know if this is going to work. We are really just saying we want to see more action. So I love and will continue to love all of the scrutiny, all of the pushback, because we're first movers. We're saying we're going to get out there and we're going to get on the ground and we're going to try it. And you guys help us prove that it's wrong, because then we're going to make progress and then we're going to keep going, because we're going to be in this for a long time. So again, it's sort of how we're looking at the situation now, but it's going to be iterative and an adaptive process. But this is where we're going to start. So what minimum thresholds do we look at? So we're looking at value chains for value chains. We're looking where there's significant loss. We're also very focused on the market, as I mentioned, so willing and able buyers and partners, so partners whether they're going to aggregate or partners whether they're going to buy. We're really focused around products, cereals and grains, roots and tubers, fruits and vegetables that can be sourced from smallholders. The enabling environment, so there are country policies, there are a number of things that sort of make it easier to launch a project such as this to demonstrate what's possible in certain ways. We're looking at market linkages, high leverage on existing infrastructure. So we don't want to come into a white space per se. We want to go where we see there is some level of activity that's happening. Maybe it's only focused on aggregation and there's no market linkage. Maybe it's focused on technology, but there's no financial arrangements that are made. So we're looking at how do we optimize value chains using some level of built infrastructure. Because in this space, we should not be starting at zero. There's a lot of work that's happening, and a lot of great work that's happening for the past at least 20, 30 years. And then in our quote-unquote first wave, what might we do first? we're looking at a diverse representative portfolio. And this is where I said, with our president, and I said, what are you guys going to do? And I'm like, we're going to do three crop categories. And what are those crop categories? Fruits and vegetables, cereals and grains, roots and tubers. Why? Like, why so much? Because I said we have to see what's possible. Maize can show us what's possible in cereals and grains. Cassava can show us what's possible in roots and tubers. Mangoes or bananas, tomatoes can show us what's possible in fruits and vegetables. If we don't learn this, Dr. Roden, if we don't try in a diverse portfolio, we're not really moving the needle. We really need to go big or go home to really see what's possible. And so far, she hasn't, fired me. So we're looking at replicable and influential models. So again, important partners, big crop categories, certain locations that have real spillover and demonstration effect in terms of the markets. Agra is a key partner of ours on almost anything in agriculture, as a lot of you know. And so, what assets and capabilities do they bring? And then really multinationals, because again, not because they're the most important or the largest buyers, but they are pace setters. If we are able to change the way that Coca-Cola sources fruits and vegetables, it's transformational, because other actors are going to say, oh, they're not only hitting their CSR targets, they're hitting their sourcing targets, and they're improving smallholder farmers' lives. Why aren't we doing that? So in a place like Kenya, Coca-Cola isn't the largest mango puree purchaser, but what they do in Kenya can be replicated on their own. We can change their norms to do it all over the world. And so some of the relationships we look at are leverage and influence, so we want to be with those who really have a strong commitment. This is too hard. So this is really all about the value proposition. So we're very clear because of the way we want. Why should smallholders do this? We talked about their incomes. Why should they change? Because they have a guaranteed market. Why should large anchor buyers, whether they private or public, why should they look at optimizing value chains for loss? And so you look at things around their commitments, around their CSR, around their guaranteed supply. So we are going to say, look, if you can change the way that you source, if you can source from smallholders, if you can look at volume purchase commitments, if you can measure and track loss, we'll look at those supply chains and focus a lot on the aggregation and the training and the technology. But what skin do you have in the game? Because we're making these supply chains more efficient. Processors, obviously, they want the contracts from large buyers. But processing is a value addition opportunity in Africa. So really, just the opportunity to have a better, secure demand, to know that there's real throughput that's happening on processing. There's sort of the value proposition to them. Agro dealers distributing right now seeds and fertilizers and pesticides. If they are adding post-harvest loss technology, it's another quote-unquote product offering. It's, they're already reaching these smallholders. They're really making them really productive in terms of yields. And then when harvest comes, 30% of those yields are lost, and those input suppliers like buy more seeds. Well, I'm really, not going to use those improved seeds because, yes, I got a lot of yield, but I also lost half of it as well because I didn't have any storage. So why don't we link the input opportunities with the post-harvest technologies? I mean, this is not rocket science. I don't have a PhD in this. This is something that we should really be thinking about when we talk about agro dealers and technology manufacturers. And aggregated farmers make the value proposition to the technology providers. If you have a community of 300 or 3,000 smallholders that say, we want to buy metal silos, we're going to be using mobile processing units, they all don't have to own one. There's collaborative assets, shared assets, leasing facilities. This is not 1970 where every man should have a tractor. No, I need a tractor for a couple hours to plow my field, and then I want to give it back. Before I moved to Nairobi, we were getting our house ready for to rent it out, and I had to do some DIY work and sanding the floors. I didn't go out and buy a $3,000 sander. I didn't buy a sander to sand my floors. I went to Home Depot. I took it for maybe 2 days. I sanded my floors, and I gave it back. And it cost me a couple $100. But we want smallholders, every smallholder have a tractor. This is, we're talking about collaborative assets, shared resources, and this is where we're really going to make the value proposition to smallholders. And then financial institutions, obviously, when they start seeing more efficient value chains, when they start seeing the post-harvest aspects, they can really start seeing agriculture. Again, it's still going to be risky because in Africa you're talking about 4% irrigation, but it's still a viable market for them. And if you and me and others are coming in and supporting the infrastructure, banks are going to step up. So again, just to close it out, when we look at this issue, Rockefeller has these are 3 of our 4 critical areas where we want to see impact in almost anything that we do. So secure livelihoods is possible and attainable when we talk about reducing post-harvest loss. We're going to secure livelihoods, talking about income, opportunity for smallholders, improve consistency of incomes across the value chain, not only for smallholders, but now you're talking about local traders, you're talking about local processors, the rural agricultural value chain. This is a job creation engine as well, because the product, you're turning some of the product as it is into derivative products, especially through processing. We look at advanced health, and I mentioned this, especially with our focus in trying to make the case for fruits and vegetables. And it's really important because these perishables provide the opportunity to really tackle some of the nutritional deficiency that we see throughout the world. And let's do something about this. And there's a lot of innovative technologies that are out there that, right now they may not be cost effective, but 5 years from now they may be. And so, working with innovative partners such as Grain Storage International, GSI, on solar cooling sheds. They had a project in India, and we said, we're going to work on the fruits and vegetable value chain in Kenya. Will you go in with us? Let's just see if this is viable. Test your solution in our value chain intervention. So again, we're brokering, bringing other people in to test some technology to see what's possible. And if it works, then we're going to be talking about scaling it and looking at it in other models. But we have to sort of start doing more collaboration and doing and testing some things on the ground. And revalue ecosystems. This came up again and again. How do we improve society, improve the world with the resources that we have? There's no planet B. There's no, we'll figure that out in the next 50 years. We have to do more to talk about conservation and preservation of these natural resources. And food loss and food waste is a critical component to the inefficiency and the environmental aspects of agriculture. Again, there's a lot of things that we all know around production, but the reality is when we lose food crops, we've lost not only the labor, but the water that's so scarce, the land that's so either degraded and scarce. We've lost the fertilizer, used fertilizers. That's why those farmers don't go back twice. Once they had a great yield and no one's buying, they're not using improved seeds or fertilizer the next time because there's no one buying. Why am I improving and I'm not making more money? So, we really are looking at this from an ecosystems aspect as well. And then, again, in terms of GHG emissions, rotting food, and this is definitely much more of a waste issue in developing countries, is really, really a prominent contributor to GHG. So we think that through this model of 4 key components and really going to specific value chains, that we can bring about and demonstrate loss, reduction, optimization in 3 key crop categories. What you don't see here, because we're not making news today, I'm just sort of sharing with you sort of 2 years of effort to really get to a signature approach. We are going to be looking at some signature crops to demonstrate, and I mentioned we're going to be looking at maize, and we're looking at maize particularly in Tanzania. We're looking at cassava, particularly in Nigeria. We're looking at and exploring opportunities in tomatoes, also in Nigeria. And then in fruits and vegetables, we're looking at Kenya around bananas and mainly mangoes. And these would be demonstrations. Rockefeller is not committed to, we're not committed either, but it's not a focus that we're sort of saying maize is the end-all, be-all, or tomatoes are so important. We want to put money on the ground and put people on the ground and work with all of you to show what's possible. And if it works in maize, try it in sorghum. Use these opportunities in wheat. These are demonstration projects to really see what's possible. What's possible in tomatoes, what's possible in mangoes. The opportunities are the same in bananas. The technology, the harvesting, the loss levels, very, very similar. So we're looking at sort of 4 key crop categories in what we call Wave 1. So we're looking at essentially a 5 to 7 year initiative where we would have a first wave with the 4 crops that I mentioned, and then be able to demonstrate it again in 4 other like crops. So if we started in maize in the first 3 years of the initiative, the next 3 we might look at rice. If we started in, again, mangoes, then we might be looking at bananas or something similar. Because I've been working in Africa and African agriculture for a long time, there are a lot of great islands of excellence. I love Ethiopia's commodity exchange program. It hasn't worked anywhere else. I love, some of the things that's happened in Nigeria with risk insurance. No, it hasn't caught fire. There are some things about some of these models that we really need to unpack and see what's replicable, what's scalable, and what is an island of excellence. Maybe some things you do get lightning in a bottle and it only works in one location, but we're really committed to sort of looking at this demonstration aspect of some of these crop categories and then bring on other partners to say, tell us where we need to iterate, tell us where we need to adapt, but we are committed to sort of starting something, and it's beyond talk. We're really in the action mode, and we're really committed to this issue because this is an urgent and addressable problem, and it's just the kind of problem that we think if we can be one of the, to leverage a lot of what's happened with ADMI, what's happened with the great work that USAID has done in Feed the Future and the innovation labs, if we can sort of look at some of the other projects and then put our weight and our systems integrator approach behind it, we can really come together and bring about change. So we are looking for partners. We are making this one of our signature agricultural efforts over the next 5 to 7 years, all things going well. And we definitely are grateful to a lot of people that have got us here. And some of those, whoever is doing the lights, if you can turn on the lights, I'm not going to do any more slides. Whoever has the lights to turn on the lights. So I want you guys not to see me, but to see some of our partners who are here, but also are the best people to talk to about some of these opportunities. And I know some of them may or may not be here, but I just want to say to Agra, so there's John Masharia who's here. John, stand up so everybody can bug you. So John is here. Margaret from Sustainable Food Labs. Margaret, are you around? Sustainable Food Labs is doing some great work on measurement and loss in value chains. Andrew from GKI. GKI, you heard about them earlier. They're the ones around those top 10 innovations that we could really look at. IGD is Helen. Helen, are you around? Helen from IGD, Initiative for Global Development. They're one of the leading organizations working with the Last Mile Alliance in Tanzania. So they're doing, a lot of these people you're going to see their poster sessions and the like. Harry from Pixera Global. This is going to be one of our big partners. He's there in the back. I think a lot of you just heard him. He'll be one of our partners in tomatoes in Nigeria. Jason flew here like that when I said we were having this. We wanted the private sector here, and AGCO GSI is really looking at some innovations around cold storage and storage in general. So we want to bring on some of their, the godfather and grandfather to all things related to the second half of the Green Revolution. I have to give respect and homage to Phil Villers, who we traveled to India together to look at post-harvest loss, and this is the president CEO of GrainPro, and they have a lot of innovative solutions. And then obviously our home partner. When we went into this 2 years ago, and it was in my docket, and I said, wow, I have expertise here and thoughts here and ideas there. And we said we may end up focusing on Africa, but we don't really know. We want to see what happened all around the world. And so we partnered with the ADMI Institute, and a lot of you know Dr. Steve Sonka, who's been literally night and day one of our key champions on this work. And then Steve has continued, and then obviously we got my brother from another mother with Prasanta, who took over from Steve, and they really have been driving our global understanding of the issue, whether it's what's happened in Vietnam or Thailand or Malaysia or Brazil and China and India, and then what is possible in various African markets. So we haven't come here alone. We're not in this alone. We're definitely open for collaboration in business, but it's a commitment that we think we all need to play a special part in. And that's where the real opportunity now is. Let's all just come together and sort of say, we want to really see some movement on this issue because, again, this is a pathway. If you look at reducing post-harvest loss, all the other aspects of the value chain, they're going to be impacted in a positive way. So let's really hone in on this problem, and I think we're going to be looking at transformational change in social, economic, and environmental opportunity. Thank you. I'm totally open to take questions as long as you don't have a proposal to have me review. I'm just teasing. But really, it's a matter of, whether there are questions, whether there's comments. We are in, well, it's late, but we are in listening mode, and we are open to have conversations and to learn, because there's been a lot of successful projects in the past. So whether you have a comment or you have a question, I'm open and available for as long as Prasanta says we have. Oh, sorry, I didn't prepare anyone with the microphone. On price. So we're really, one of the interesting things we've done a lot of, and we're continuing to do a lot of. I think the gist of the question with smallholder farmers being at sort of part of the, thank you, part of the central component. What's being done to ensure some of the power dynamics, especially around price. So we're really right now, again, we're the first people to say we don't know, but we'll work with the best and the brightest who focus on price, whether it's WFP or others. But we have done a lot of analysis specifically around the value chains that we're looking at. So the price dynamics and the volatility, especially in some of the crops and the crop cycles, is really interesting. So typically we're looking at our intervention is really about price stabilization, because the glut happens in tomatoes or mangoes or what have you, and the price goes down. So if you have other off-taking opportunities, whether it's drying or fresh or processing, then you can look at some level of stabilization. Everybody in here knows better than I do about the stabilization opportunities that come for price and grains. So if you have storage, you play the market just like people play bingo. You can really figure it out the way and sell high and buy low. And so we think that this technology and the financing are key components to really look at price stabilization. But we're learning a lot. We're investigating right now in these specific value chains, what are the dynamics that drive price high or low, or the thresholds for tomatoes or for maize or for fruits. Because we're not really looking at cash crops and some of the global commodity crops, and there's a lot of local market, we feel pretty confident that we won't get into certain levels of distortion, but it's one of the key unintended consequences that we have to be honest with our board and say, as you consider this, we don't know the answer yet. If we sort of drive up the level of production and drive up the level of availability of certain food crops, what's going to happen? But we feel like the technology and the financing and the other market actors can lead to some level of price stabilization.
I just want to ask, in the whole scheme of things, how are the governments of the countries you're going to work in? I'm from Kenya. I would love to know, how is the government involved? Are you partnering with the government? Are you getting them to support this? Because I think most of the initiatives to address post-harvest losses in developing countries have been private sector, multinational driven, USAID, Rockefeller, but how do we get our governments involved? Because we saw in the presentation in the morning where Rwanda, the government was involved, and the effect is there. So can we get our governments really involved so that we can see the desired impact?
It's a great question, and it's one of the ones that come up a couple of different times when people sort of see the model, and we don't sort of talk about a lot of the enabling environment activities. Very specifically, we're 100% agree with you that most of the projects that we've seen that have been successful, maybe in one country, maybe they've had government involvement, but more than anything, it's been the private sector driving them. So in a country like Kenya that sort of values the horticulture industry on one side and the production, we're sort of saying to government, especially around technology. I mean, I can give you a specific example in Tanzania on hermetic storage. So no one had ever seen an ultra-hermetic cocoon that could store 500 to 5,000 kilos of maize. And so when the technology is coming into the country, of course, it's taxed like anything else. But most agricultural technologies didn't necessarily have tariffs on them. So we had to work with the government to sort of help them understand that this is an agricultural technology that's going to be beneficial for your problem of storage in maize. And so some of it's a lot of dialogue. The other thing is prioritizing, leading our prioritization or mapping our prioritization with some of their crops. So the government of Nigeria has prioritized rice, cassava, and maize. And so we didn't say, let's go in and focus on wheat. We said, let's go in and focus on where they have a certain prioritized. So we're all about looking at the government as a partner and an enabling environment. We've done a couple different things, whether it's working through Grow Africa, the World Economic Forum, and the AU NEPAD entity that really is consolidating a lot of what governments are doing. And we also are having direct linkages with both ministers of ag and ministers of finance in most countries where we're thinking about operating, because we feel like that's the tandem. Both of them are really necessary in driving change. In Kenya right now, Aiden Mohammed sort of has a couple different hats, and so Kenya is very, very interesting in terms of trying to have the government leverage. But we do see them as a critical partner. The last thing I'll say is that some of the policy interactions and things that need to happen, they're not going to be driven by us. And so if you look at from the SDGs to the G20 to the Malabo Declaration, which is talking about agricultural transformation, which has a very specific component around loss, I looked at that and I'm like, yes, this is great. You know, the African Union, 34 heads of state have committed to cutting post-harvest loss in half. And then you think about Kissinger in 1974, you know, the world should cut post-harvest loss in half. But we have been talking to FAO and saying FAO is working with the AU to help member states, help countries really figure out a roadmap for loss reduction. So we're going to come in as an implementer, if you will, and do some things on the ground. But we also are going to work with partners who can have the interlocutor relationship with the government to make sure the government knows what we're doing, but also align some of their strategy to what we're doing. If we're doing it and they're trying to figure it out, let's work together. So it's a collaborative process. It's government, right? So there's no quick answers, and we're definitely conscious that they are a partner, a critical partner in anything that we do in the countries. And so we're continually trying to figure out ways to leverage and to advise on any aspect of our strategy.
Pakistan Army, US trade during Afghan-Russia war. We are in a capacity to give you your required technology on technological processing output. For the first year, we can give you 50% reduction of. Second year, 75. Third year, 100% guarantee will be given by us with our technology, and you will be able to save each and every producer.
No, thank you for that. And it's indicative, your comments and your offer and the opportunity is indicative of something that's sort of central to our strategy, where we do know a lot of things have happened in different markets. And so we are trying to do a lot of what we call South-South collaboration. I mean, Brazil and Thailand don't produce, 100 times less cassava than Nigeria, but basically make 100 more percentage income. And so how do we learn what's happened in other markets? And so if there are technological solutions that you bring from your experience in Pakistan, we definitely would love to hear about them. But the space should hear about them as well. I mean, I spent last year almost 1 month in India doing nothing but looking at innovative technologies, processing, and the like, to sort of really see what are the best practices. So, no, welcome the opportunity to learn more about what you're doing, and if you're looking to make an investment in Africa, then we would be definitely willing to sort of see if there's ways to either point you in the right direction or talk to you about opportunities if you're in some of the same value chains that we are. But this is really important because there are a lot of things happening in different markets that we can collaborate more on, especially in the South Asia, where smallholder farming is very similar to what's happening in the African context. Maybe one more? Yeah, one more. Mm.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the presenter for the very good presentation and the work you're doing around. Okay, I'm Innocent, from Rwanda.
Yes.
Yes.
Your Excellency.
Yes, just want to follow up with what my sister from Kenya was saying. It's very important. This issue for involving government, I would just make a kind of comment from, in addition to what I say. It's not a question. But by looking what is happening here, throughout the presentation and the findings, there is a lot happening. But how do we make sure that is reaching more farmers as we did? So when you go through all this research out, can we make in the way that it is understandable by these policymakers that they can be digested and straight influence them? I was reading one poster outside that trying to translate in values that attract quickly these policymakers and make voice around that to attract these are issues happening. And what I was trying to say is actually when you look at just our experience, it's just till you start showing that the production can happen by intensification, and then you see issue of post-harvest. Then, if not involving all these government, just you invest, and you rightly said, involving this Minister of Finance working together with the Minister of Agriculture and the other ministries, taking the case of Rwanda, the governance matters a lot. Having a specific scheduled planning and the follow-up through what we call economic clusters, that's where we discuss these matters and show how it affect entire economy of the country helps a lot. So that is, in summary, what I was trying to say, translate what is happening in a real sense that the policymakers can understand and make a voice around, and then the governance in a place that we can make advocacy through existing structures, farmers' organization, and all these organizations which are very strong to be heard by this decision-making, we'll see things happening. That was just complement to what we were saying, the governance in place, the commitment, and I was saying lastly in the morning, having the commitment of the President of the Republic saying, I don't want to see this issue of post-harvest losses happening. That's a very strong message. So, and if you use the existing structures, governance, to manage the post-harvest issues, then you are done. So that was to complement existing structures, this organization, and the research outcomes to integrate in the integrated manner system that will help to go faster managing these post-harvest issues. Thank you.
No, thank you, Honorable Permanent Secretary. And I think we all should be thankful to you. I can tell you from at least the knowledge that I have on the African context that Rwanda is the gold standard for your question from my sister from Kenya. They have a department, a division within the Ministry of Agriculture that's specifically focused around post-harvest loss. And the loss levels that they've seen being reduced in potatoes in particularly, but any number of crops, is because there is a consolidated effort around the government to sort of say this is important. And so you see reduction in terms of import tariffs on technology. You see a focus by the government. You see them inviting in private sector to bring in innovative solutions such as DADCO that does mobile processing units. So it really, I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, one of the things that we can't be all things to all people, especially from a philanthropic standpoint, and so we are trying to leverage those who do those government interactions best for the greater cause. But we have seen in success in Rwanda when a government does put its weight behind the issue of post-harvest loss, and the other actors in stakeholders in the system get behind that, there is transformational change. So if you haven't seen some of the success stories around post-harvest loss in Rwanda, it's worth noting, and thankful that you're here to share some of that, Honorable Permanent Secretary. Thank you. Prasanta, can we go eat? Can we go eat? Can we change our clothes and go eat, please? No, I'm joking.
Yes, let's do that. Let's give him another big round of applause.